Even though, Vanquishers aren't that good, I'll always have him in the force. So what this was, it was probably my second tournament with the Guard. This was towards the very beginning of 8th edition. No, that wasn't the very beginning, but the Codex had just come out. So at this point, Guard was still pretty new, but they were still very powerful in terms of the firepower and everything. Everybody was kind of scared of Guard. But I wasn't really running a list that was very viable competitively at the time because I was taking an Apocalypse themed tank company list where I literally had 12 Leman Russes. That was the whole list. There were no infantry, so there was 0 screen. And this was at a point in the edition where, just to remind people, because people probably forgot about this, but at the beginning of 8th edition, you could have first turn charge, deep strike, and charge. And what everyone was doing, Anyway, I'll explain, because this guy was doing exactly what he needed to completely crush my list, which you would say, well, you're running Cadian tanks, that's the hard counter to chaos. Not if they wrap you up on turn 1 and you can't, do anything. So
what was this guy running?
So he was running a chaos soup. At the time, the meta net list. So he had Mortarion in there. So it was Mortarion, it had Chaos Space Marines Alpha Legion for the -1 to hit. And more importantly, he had the big squad of cultists that you could infiltrate forward and then charge on turn 1. Because at the time that hadn't been nerfed yet, so the Alpha Legion stratagem let you just deploy 9 inches away from your enemy, then you just moved up in charge with a 3-inch charge. With a massive squad of cultists that, he could basically, if he wanted to, string them out, because you could Congo line all the way across and then just tie up all of my tanks, You would declare one tank as the target of the charge, move everybody up to 1 inch away from the other tanks, and then consolidate or pile into them. And then you would shut down the whole Gud line for the rest of the game. The game would be over just from that. But in addition to that, he had a Chaos Demon detachment that he was running. And this had the Khorne Bloodletter Bomb, which is 30 Khorne Bloodletters with the banner and upgrade, which basically guarantees that they make their charge. And once again, turn 1. And I didn't have a screen. So when I looked at the list, he was kind of scared of it because it was Cadian Guard. And he was thinking, because I remember when I started unpacking my army at the tournament, this is probably the second game of it, he was looking at it and he was kind of muttering under his breath like, oh, Guard, or whatever. And I'm like, I looked at your list. In my head, I didn't say it to him, but in my head I was thinking, I looked at your list like, I'm about to lose this game if I don't go first. And even if I go first, here's the thing. Yeah, the tanks can kill stuff, but they can't kill it so well that I can just literally table them when most of this stuff is in deep strike.
Right.
And they're gonna come down and hit me on the first turn. So there was no way for me to really prevent that tie-up from happening.
Yeah.
And really all he had to do was just weather the punch on turn 1 and then tie me up in my deployment zone and just sit on the objectives for the rest of the game and he would win. There would be no way for my tanks to break out of the deployment zone if the Bloodletters and the Cultists got there. And I knew that, so I was like, okay, I'm probably gonna lose this. Well, we rolled the dice to see who went first. He won to go first, and I was like, oh God. So now I'm not even gonna get to shoot, and then Mortarion will be here by turn 2, and it'll be real bad. Well, here's the first thing that happened, the very opening kind of, this might be a special game. So I seized the initiative, which in 8th edition, you could roll a dice. If you were going second, you could roll a dice if you wanted to, and on a 6th, you would basically go first.
Right.
So I got that, and I got to go first, and I was very relieved because that meant at least I could remove his threats, the firepower threats. So he had Mortarion in the middle of a character. He had like a Demon Prince, Ahriman. Obviously, it's literally just picked everything from every Chaos Codex because it didn't have the allied limits at the beginning of 8th either. So
right.
It was like one at everything. And he had a Alpha Legion Fire Raptor gunship sitting right over them and then screened out by Plague Bearers and stuff, right. So that I couldn't get to them as if I would do that with Guard, but you know what I mean. He just, that was his default plan. Right. So I was like, okay, at least I can get rid of, I can definitely get rid of Mortarion because I had the Relic of Lost Cadia, so I was gonna get to reroll all my hits and wounds. So there's no way, statistically, like just a handful, not all 12, like maybe just 4 of my tanks would just remove Mortarion statistically, right. No matter what. So I was very confident I would at least get rid of him. I might be able to, blow away the Plague Bearer screen, so at least that's not getting to me. and I might be able to do some damage to the cultists. He was pretty smart in that he put, instead of just stringing the cultists out in front of me and gambling for the first turn roll, he put them all in the terrain features in the center of the board where I couldn't see them clearly without moving, so I wouldn't get a clear shot at the cultists.
Right.
So that was going to get to me probably no matter what. And he had warp time up his sleeve that he could have used, you know. So he knew what he was doing. He wasn't a bad player, but it was still looking bad. But I was okay. I'll do whatever damage I can, and I'll try to push out of my deployment zone a little bit. So I moved some of my tanks forward just so that when the charge came, he'd hit maybe just a couple of my tanks, and then I'd at least have some wiggle room with some of the others, but it wouldn't be able to stop the end from coming. But I just wanted to make sure I killed Mortarion. So I fired one tank at Mortarion and did, you know, the usual things, rerolling all my hits, all my wounds. Of course, you know, damage goes through, and did a whole bunch of wounds to him. And I was like, okay, great. So overlapping fields of fire, which is a Cadium stratagem that now if you wound something, all of the other Cadian units in your army that shoot at the same target get +1 to hit.
Right.
So suddenly my entire gun line of just regular Leman Russes are now tank commanders.
Yeah.
So they're hitting on 3s, yeah. And see, it's such a good hard counter to anyone who's running like a Knight or a like super heavy whatever, Primarch, Lord of War, whatever.
Yeah.
So there was basically no way Mortarion was going to live through maybe the next 2 or 3 tanks shooting at him. And I knew that, and he knew that. So this guy, here's what he started doing. So after that first tank fired, he was rolling the dice for the first set of saves right in front of me, like where I could see them on the table like you normally would in a game of 40K where you're playing and you don't want to, you know, piss off your opponent.
Yeah.
Well, there were these two, in the center of the board, there were these 2 really big pieces of terrain that were like these massive tower-like things, and you couldn't really see behind them. They were big line of sight blocking things. Well, he started rolling all of his saves like at the base of one of the towers so that I couldn't see the results. And then before I could really think to like lean around and look at him, he'd say, oh, I failed this many, and then pick it up. Well, long story short, the next 2 or 3 Leman Russes that fired at Mortarion didn't do a single wound to him. And I was like, wait a second. So I'm rerolling all my hits and wounds. I'm getting all these wounds through, and you're making all your 4+ invul saves against these. And I started to get suspicious because like I wasn't just gonna. So I was like, wait a second. Wait a second. So I fired another tank, did some wounds. But this time, when he rolled the dice, I like leaned all the way over and like looked around the tower and saw the dice for a second before he picked them up. And there were failed saves in there, and he told me there weren't any. And I said, wait a second. I saw, you know, 1s, 2s, and 3s in there. We're not doing this. Stop, roll them where I can see them. Well, he didn't. He just kept rolling them there, thinking that I wasn't gonna like keep leaning over to look at the dice.
Yeah.
And no, I wasn't gonna get tired. I mean, the game had only been going on for like 5 minutes. Like, I'm not gonna get tired if it means that if you're doing that to me. I was like, okay, no way, no, we're not playing this. But so long story short, I sat there and basically would just watch all the dice rolls, and now suddenly Mortarion died in like 2 tanks. So great, okay, now he was gone. The problem is, already half of my tank gun line had fired.
Right.
At one target that really should have been removed with 2 or 3, so I didn't really have that much left to go at the rest of his army, but I did it what I could. And we got to basically the end of my shooting phase. I did some damage, killed some cultists. I killed, the Mortarion. Oh, Mortarion exploded too, and he told me that he doesn't explode, but I already knew that he could explode, and he ended up exploding after I had him check his codex to look at the rule. And so Mortarion exploded, did some mortal wounds to everyone around him, put some wounds on Ahriman, put some wounds on the Demon Prince. And then basically I had 1 tank left that hadn't fired. Now he was a tank commander, and he's this glorious bastard that, like all my other guys, have like action poses, like they're giving a signal or like doing something like that, or like looking through their binoculars or whatever. But this guy is like just kind of coolly just got his arm propped up on the hatch and everything. He's just like, yeah, whatever, all these enemies here, I'll just remove that guy from across the board with my Vanquisher cannon. So he was not worried at all. I was worried because there were still the Fire Raptors sitting there, and it had 10 wounds left on it after everything else had fired. So that's a lot of wounds for one tank, which statistically doesn't really do that much damage against things. And I didn't have overlapping fields of fire. You know, I had re-rolls, but not, you know, like, you know, from the Acadian Relic, but that was it. So, which is still good enough though, you know, because you're getting basically a very high percentage chance of wounding and stuff. But anyway, so this is the last shot. So the Vanquisher fires at the Fire Raptor, and suddenly he tells me, no, this is -2 to hit, like an Eldar flyer in 8th edition. And I was like, wait, no, why is it -2 to hit? And he's like, oh, it's because it's Alpha Legion. Their thing is -1 to hit. But what he didn't know is I also play Chaos Marines. Like, I love Chaos Marines, and, you know, I know their rule, and it really kind of made me mad because Andrew's Eldar, he was like, oh yeah, all my stuff gets -1 to hit. I'm like, mine only applies to infantry, demons, and dreadnoughts. All my tanks don't get anything. They don't even benefit from a chapter tactic. And so I knew that, so I said, no, that's not how it works. And I recited the rule to him verbatim out of the codex, that no, actually it only applies to these types of units, and that's very clearly a flying vehicle, so doesn't get that bonus. So no, actually I do hit you, and I hit you on 4. So here we go. So I rolled it, hit him, the last cannon missed, but the Vanquisher cannon, both shots, because he fires twice, because you know, if they move less than half, they fire twice. Both Vanquisher shots hit the Fire Raptor, both of them wounded. He failed both saves, and I rolled the damage. Now the Vanquisher has one cool thing about it. You roll 2 dice and pick the highest for the damage. So I actually did 11 wounds to it and killed it. But here's the thing, like that alone wouldn't have won me the game. That's not what it was. But here's the decisive factor was right here. The moment is when it died, he rolled to see if it exploded, and he rolled a 6. He CP re-rolled it into another 6, so it still exploded. When the Fire Raptor explodes, it does D6 mortal wounds to everything around it, which, by the way, was all of those characters that were already wounded from Mortarion. Basically, it crashed down right on top of the middle of his army and literally killed all of his characters. Armon dead, Demon Prince dead. There were probably like 5 Plague Bearers left out of that unit. It was like everything was dead. And yeah, he basically rage quit right then and there. And he said, he was just like, and said, yeah, I quit. And then he literally stormed out of the tournament, like, and never came back. But here's the thing that got me about it. I was like, you know, I didn't, in my head, like if it had been just a regular game, just like me playing, like not a tournament, you know, just to have fun, because we'd literally only been playing maybe like 20 minutes. I mean, this is a really short game of 40K. You know, I would have wanted to keep playing, and so, you know, I would have told him, hey, you can still win this pretty easily. You've got your Bloodletter Bomb and Deep Strike. Your cultists are still intact. You can lock me up, and I'm going to be stuck in this deployment zone forever. And then you might still be able to win on objectives, even without all your characters and stuff. Yeah. But I didn't tell him because because I didn't want to interrupt him while he was making a mistake, and so so I just shook his hand and let it go, and basically maxed points on it. But yeah, so it was pretty crazy. I don't think I've just the karma, just the instant karma for, you know, him like trying to like cheese me on the rules and the dice rolling and stuff. Yeah. So I think usually when I paint kill markings on my tank commanders, it can only be from a killing shot on a Lord of War or a Super Heavy or something like that in a tournament. So it can't be like just killing a Fire Raptor is a big target, but it's not a Super Heavy, so it wouldn't have counted for anything normally. But that's why he gets the special one, the red kill marking. If you see a red kill marking on one of my tanks, what that means is that that's not necessarily a Lord of War. It could be, but all it is some sort of decisive kill that literally shifted the outcome of a match. Yeah. And that Fire Raptor kill literally was the morale-breaking like moment that just made him just literally throw up his hands and give up the game. And so, because I mean, the thing is, he could have won that game. Like, all he had to do was keep a cool head and not get tilted and just continue with his game plan, because, you know, yeah, the firepower on those models is good, and Mortarion's good in close combat, but did he really think it was going to get across the board to a tank company anyway? No, so it shouldn't have been like a pivotal part of his plan. You know, his actual successful plan would have been timing and combat with those two combat bombs, and it would have been over. But that was the last game I also went without or the last tournament I went to without a screen. After that, I started putting infantry in all my tank lists, but because I knew, I was like, I'm not letting that. I'm not taking that. I got away with it that time, but I'm not letting that happen again. So from then on, I always had a screen of guard infantry and took less tanks. But yeah, so lessons learned on, I guess, both sides. But yeah, so it was kind of cool.